Joining me now is someone who is perfectly situated to address all of this morning's major stories. It's former Secretary of State John Kerry. Mr. Secretary, welcome back to Meet the Press, sir.
Good morning, Chuck. Thank you.
I got to start with London. You heard Michael Leiter. You've heard a little bit of what the Prime Minister, Theresa May, said. I want to focus on that specific phrase she used, Mr. Secretary, that extremism, tolerance of extremism has been there's been for too long, too much tolerance of this extremism in the UK. Is she right?
Well, that's a judgment she's going to have to make about their own relationship with the Muslim community in Great Britain. And as Michael just said, they've had a long-standing problem with respect to greater levels of alienation, a harder time assimilating into the broader British society, a lack of similar opportunity. So there are a lot of ingredients, and I'm going to leave it to her and to them to sort that out, particularly 5 days before an election. Let me just say that obviously every American feels as if we were attacked also. I mean, There isn't anybody in America today who doesn't reach out and express our sorrow and our solidarity with the British people. But the fact is that if people want to kill themselves, this is really hard for law enforcement. I mean, I know from my own law enforcement days how hard people work and how significant the intelligence gathering and coordination component of this is. But if someone is ready to just go out and meet a fusillade of law enforcement bullets and die, you can take people with you. And what we really need to do is focus more, I believe, not on a travel ban, as Michael said. Travel ban will be cannon fodder to the recruiters. It's the worst thing we could do. But we do need to do, and we do, extraordinary screening, but a great deal more effort has to go into the building of community, the reaching out and working with these entities, with these sectors of society, so that there is not as significant a gap as there is in many parts of the world, by the way, not just in Britain. All over the world, there's too much distance between government and the people. Do you think, look, she's calling for much more pressure to be put on these digital companies, Silicon Valley, whether it's a WhatsApp messaging service, Facebook. There's a lot of tools that many of these groups are able to use. Does Silicon Valley need to do more? I was just going to say, do you think Silicon Valley does have a greater responsibility here than they're taking? Silicon Valley has a major responsibility, and almost every company is engaged very directly in a dialogue with the government. We worked very closely with them over the years that I was serving as secretary. But look, Dash put out a message. It can put it out on the internet. It can put it out in many different ways, saying to people during Ramadan, you should attack people with cars, knives, and guns. Now, if you turn around and just blame that message exclusively on the internet, we're making an enormous mistake. And if we reach too far without being sensitive to our own values, we give them an extraordinary victory. So there's a balance here. The bottom line is that in too many places, in too many parts of the world, you've got a large gap between governance and people, and between the opportunities those people have. We talked about this after Paris. We talked about this after Belgium. This is the same problem of people living in isolation and not feeling as if they have a sufficient stake in society, in their world, that life is worth living. And if you want to take your own life, you can take other lives with you. Mr. Secretary, I want to move to the Paris deal. You were intricately involved. It's why we invited you on the show. I want to go back in the... That's not the only reason. No, I understand that. I want to go back into the Wayback Machine here. The Financial Times, back when you were negotiating this, here was what was said. Some experts have argued that while Mr. Obama is making the case for a deal, there is no guarantee that his successor, assuming it is a Republican climate change skeptic, would not walk away from a Paris agreement. Mr. Kerry dismissed those concerns by arguing that the Republicans had, quote, eliminated themselves from contention in the general election, unquote, because of their approach during the campaign on issues such as climate change. Do you now regret not making this treaty ratified in the United States Senate, forcing it to be codified here? No, I really not, because it wouldn't have happened. It's very simple. Let's be realistic about it. The president made an executive agreement because that was the best that we could do. And we presumed that common sense, that basic economics, that science would ultimately prevail. I don't think anybody could have predicted that we would have seen a story like we saw in the New York Times today about how the Republican Party has traveled lock, stock, and barrel into the hands of the Koch brothers and special interests, where they are prepared to stand up and deny science and deny facts. I mean, what does Donald Trump know that Rex Tillerson, the former CEO of ExxonMobil, doesn't know? What does he know that the CEO of Apple, of Google, of General Electric, of companies all across America who urged the president not to pull out? What does Donald Trump know that President Xi, who runs an enormous economy, or President Macron, or Chancellor Merkel, or Theresa May don't know? I mean, the fact is that his whole staff cannot tell you whether or not he believes that climate change is a hoax. And I will say to you, if you truly understand the science, if you have done your due diligence and homework, there is no way that you cannot conclude that there's an urgency to doing something, and you would not pull out of Paris.
All right, I take you at your word on that and this urgency issue. Obviously, you have a roadblock of a good chunk of Americans who do not believe this urgency, and you just laid out a case that you think they've been misled. What could
the majority of Americans support action on climate change and support staying in Paris.
I know, but as you understand, there is a political divide, and the president does feel politically secure with his base that they're comfortable with this decision. And it tells me that your message hasn't penetrated essentially red America. Why?
Well, because there's an anger and a frustration in a lot of parts of America by average folks who have felt like they're getting screwed by the government and by life over the course of the last years. And if you look at what's happened with respect to the economic crisis of 2008 and 9, and you look at our tax structure, and you look at the favors that are done for powerful interests, and you look at the average person working harder and not getting ahead, there's every reason for people to be very angry and very disposed to put first, above all, their economic situation. So I'm not surprised. There's no surprise to me that you can camouflage, as they are, in a phony economic argument that has no relationship to the reality of what's happening in the marketplace. Last year, because of Paris, more money was spent on alternative, renewable, and sustainable development research and implementation than on fossil fuels. And when Donald Trump says to the world, well, we're going to negotiate a better deal, I mean, you know, he's going to go out and find a better deal. That's like O.J. Simpson saying he's going to go out and find the real killer. Everybody knows he isn't going to do that because he doesn't believe in it. Because if he did believe in it, you wouldn't pull out of Paris. America has unilaterally ceded global leadership on this issue, which for years, even Republican presidents, George H.W. Bush, you know, pushed in this direction.
Let me go back to tone and messaging again, because again, look, we're having there's the facts and figures that demand attention. There's no doubt about it. But at the end of the day, you know this is cultural, and this becomes something different, as you just very well described. But you also said this decision was, quote, a decision acted with stupidity and self-destructiveness and ignorance. And the reason I highlight those words is that many people in red America hear that and they think, geez, they think I'm stupid. Do you think the messaging needs to change in how you talk about this and how you create a sense of urgency with this chunk of America that isn't listening to you?
Yes, no question about it. That there has to be far more focus on the economic message. I think that if you look at red America, I mean, there are about 2.6 to 3 million jobs that are existing in America today in a fast-growing sector of our economy. And of those, 50% of them are in red states that Donald Trump won. So because of this decision, American leadership in those sectors is now going to be put at risk. We could lose some of our ability to be able to grow those jobs. and in fact lose out on the largest market of the future. The biggest market in the world in the future is going to be trillions of dollars spent in the sector of energy. And if the United States has isolated itself now, standing only with Syria and with Nicaragua, and Nicaragua, by the way, wanted to do more. They did not sign it because they didn't like it for its, for the fact of doing it. So look, Chuck, I think that we do have to do a better job pointing out to people how this is part of the economic future. But look, we also have to, Donald Trump says he represents the forgotten man.
Yep.
What about the forgotten children in America who are hospitalized in the summer because of the quality of air with environmentally induced asthma? What about the forgotten farmer who is suffering from crop dislocation, from drought, from water, all kinds of challenges? What about the forgotten citizens of New Orleans who worry that the levee may break because of the rise of seawater? We have to be talking to the same forgotten people in America and make a better argument to them about exactly how their lives are negatively affected.
Secretary Kerry, busy morning. I appreciate you coming on and sharing your views on this extraordinary Sunday. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and then click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.